2, 1, go. Welcome to the Rain City Podcast, a place where faith meets the crossroads of life and where we help you navigate life's secular paths with a Christian compass. We're stepping into a new era where the conversation around mental health is as casual as talking about how the weather is outside or how your family is doing. So days are gone of silence and stigma, and yet there's one demographic of people that are experiencing an incredibly tough time, and it's men between the ages of 20 to 40. And in Europe, the biggest killer of men under 20 or under 45 rather is themselves. But sadly, if you go back 60 years or 100 years, the story isn't that much different. It's just now the problem is much more present and visible, and it seems to be getting worse. And so there's a mental health crisis in men. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the current battle of men's mental health, how we can strengthen our minds and spirits in the Lord, and reviewing some biblical examples around similar struggles that lends us good mental models for reflecting upon our own lives. So now I'd like to introduce today's guests. In the left corner, we have, weighing at 155 kilograms of anime knowledge, we have the dashing, the prancing, the guitar smashing, the Colgate whitening exhortation maestro, and my biggest hype man, Marcus Lee.
Hey, I'm glad to be here on the Top 1% podcast.
And in the right corner, we got the guy with the most fly, Mr. Pep in his step, with massive calves, a clean right hook, the silent theologian. It's the man who an entire nation is named after. It's Cameroon.
Glad to be here, Ty. Glad to be here, Ty. Thank you.
Welcome, guys. So, okay, let's lay the groundworks for today's conversation. So we live obviously in a mostly digital world where technology is present in just about every aspect of our lives. And so our brains are focused on externalizing our attention. And essentially what that means is we're spending less time reflecting and having deep thoughts and spending more time looking to external validation or external sources to answer questions that normally we would be reflecting on. So things are like, what does it mean to be successful, or what does it mean to be happy, or what does it mean to be a man, for example? And so we're looking to like celebrities in North America, rather, such as like LeBron James or like an Andrew Tate or like a Donald Trump, or I don't know what other celebrity comes to mind. But the problem is that all of these different celebrities have their own, I guess, signals, if you want to call it that. They have their own mantra. And so when you don't have your own internal dialogue, you don't give yourself that time to reflect and sort of come up with your own answers. So you're getting all of your answers to life from other people. And so that, leads to confusion, and that leads to tough conversations with friends or family because you yourself aren't confident in, the definitions you have for yourself. And so, busy business people or just, regular students or what have you, they'll listen to podcasts and think, oh, okay, well, like I need to go meditate and I need to go do these things, because ironically, those are the only times when they give themselves to reflect. And so that's what they call like, like quiet time. But all it is just giving yourself time to reflect. And so I think it's a really interesting time that we're living in. And I'm curious to know both of your guys' thoughts on, have you had firsthand experiences with what I've been talking about, or, what are your thoughts?
I think that's very true. I myself, I'm pretty absorbed in my own phone. TikTok, Instagram, even YouTube. Depending on what your algorithm is, I think success looks different. Probably like 10 years ago, I was like, I guess I'm still pretty into cars, but I guess now I'm like doing stuff to my own car, but I love to see like people do stuff to their cars. So, on my YouTube, I'm following people who are YouTubers who have their own garages and, have like 10 cars, and they're all working on their cars all the time, and they're racing cars and stuff like that. And I guess success on YouTube, is attributed to, I guess, like how many subscribers you have, how many followers you have, how many likes you get. And maybe even how much merch you sell and stuff like that. So, I mean, and I guess what kind of car you can drive and like fix up and stuff like that. So I guess before, I mean, that's what I would equate success to. And I mean, if you don't have your own identity, I think you're very susceptible to, what you see on YouTube and like TikTok and stuff. So, I mean, I think I was pretty absorbed into that, but then, I started going to school and then I found a job and, I went to school first, and going to school, I guess, changed my outlook a lot, because there's no way that I could have gotten into the schooling that I did without a supernatural power. And I definitely give my whole career to, and my current success to, what God's given me. So I think, your aspect changes when your life circumstances change. And yeah, I guess nowadays I think it's much harder to recognize those things because you're so distracted by the digital world. 10 years ago, YouTube was probably like the biggest thing. There was no TikTok. I mean, there was Vine, but I mean, I wasn't really into Vine. So, but yeah, so I think for me at least, I was lucky enough to be in a day and age where reflection was, you had no choice if you didn't. I mean, you would have a choice to do it if you didn't go on your computer or your phone. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess life was different back in the 80s. Right? We were born a decade apart. So but what does it mean to like own a car then for you? Because you're like so into cars. Like, did you develop your own internal monologue for that? Or?
I mean, at first, my first car that I bought was like a 2-door sports car. So I really, really enjoyed that. And I guess like my I guess how I saw myself was like, how do I look when I drive this car? Like, I want to keep this car clean. Okay. I want to make sure it's washed. I got like new rims for it. Like, I made sure it ran well.
Can you only wear certain outfits when you go in the car?
Oh, no. I don't care about that.
Okay.
Man, every outfit I had.
Okay.
No, but yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, but I guess now, a car, I still care about the look of my car. Like, I still want to keep it clean. I want to keep it fresh, smelling good, looking good, vacuumed. But for me, it's mostly just to take myself from A to B. But also, I mean, I guess a side story. I really want, my dream car is like a van.
Okay.
And I want a van because I want to be able to drive people from place to place. And with a van, you can drive like lots of people. I don't know why that came into my mind, but I think maybe it's influenced by my first car being a 2-seater and I couldn't drive anybody. But now I guess maybe my values changed. Like, I care about people and like friends more. I just want to be able to do stuff for other people. So I don't know, maybe a van is the way to go, but
you're trying to bring everyone along with you on the journey. That's how about you, Cameron?
So my take on this is that, like, it's one thing that my dad used to tell me all the time when I was a kid. When I'd be like, Dad, why is that person doing such a weird thing? I'd be like, because as a kid I was analyzed people, and my dad was like, the first thing he'd usually say is, everyone needs a community. So he's gonna go into that thing because he's found community there, and it's similar for a lot of men when they look into a lot of different things. Like, we have the gym bros. That's a whole community. Like, they're going to accept you no matter what. It's like broken hearts. It's like people are going to the gym. Everybody's accepting. Like, we play volleyball. People there are usually pretty good. True. And then everybody's relatively kind in the volleyball community. True. So people will be like, I want to go play volleyball now. It's the same thing with like these big, like, esteemed leaders. Like, you have the Andrew Tates where it's like, now you have like the Hustlers University people. And like, you have the same ideologies. That's part of your same community. You have like Donald Trump. You have the same political views. That's part of your community. And so I feel like with that like, even if you don't necessarily have the same traits as first as these other people, what community you associate with, you develop into that. Where it's like, some toxic person might have come into the volleyball community, but then we straighten them out because we're like, bro, you can't act like that on the court. True. And then they're like, okay. But they still want to play volleyball, so they're going to become a nicer person. And it becomes like that for a lot of different communities, a lot of different spaces. I feel like that influence can be very positive in some cases, but also very negative in other cases, where you have like some online behavior where people become like incellular and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting how people's like, I guess, narrative and mental model of just like how to live life gets so influenced by the circles that they're in and the communities that they belong to. You know, you think about, like gym communities, personal communities, religious communities, family communities, right? And we just kind of associate that with like normal life. But some of them, like, we don't get to choose. Like, we're just brought up in a certain place, right? Like, what are the chances that you got to choose, like, where you're born or, like, who you grew up with? Like, not that, you know, much, but they come with a loaded set of, like, values or beliefs, and that just subconsciously influences you. You know, like, we can call them sometimes, like, generational curses, but if you break it down systematically, it's, like, culture within your family and within the people that you're hanging around. And so now when we're spending most of our time looking at our phones and not spending enough time actually just analyzing yourself and like the way you grew up and the way you think can bring a lot of, I guess, detrimental results when you face hard times, because then you don't have like a solid foundation to like pick yourself up or like remind yourself like, oh, this is who I am. This is who I want to be. And so like then you like go on your phone and you scroll, and the first thing you hear is like, you need to toughen up. You need to go to the gym. Like, what are you doing? Stop scrolling on your phone. So then you just like then ascribe that to like, okay, that's what I need to like nail. And I'm going to delete Instagram. I'm going to delete TikTok. I'm going to stop talking to everybody. I'm just going to go to the gym. Like, you don't understand me. You don't know my life. But the gym understands me, you know? And it's sort of like that kind of, I guess, toxic masculinity that has built up as a result, at least for men's experiences.
I think that's true. I mean, like, I don't know, like, I don't work out, but like I get a lot of like workout videos and stuff like that, and it's like so true. Like, I mean, I'm sure you know C-Bum, like Chris Bum is dead.
Mr. Olympia.
Yeah, there's like a video of him at like pre-competition, and like the guys are working out to, I guess, like get a pump on before the competition, and like he's the only one that like keeps his shirt on when they're like doing some like I guess dumbbell incline presses and stuff. And they're like, yo, like, why don't you take your shirt off? And he's like, no, it's okay. And they're like, what? Don't be a take it off. Like, show us what you got. And like, it's like, so I feel like that's what people think like guys should be like super tough, super buff, like super big. And like, if you go to the gym, like that's what you're going to be like. But obviously, you know, not all gym bros are like that, you know, like you just go to the gym to like get fit and like work out. And then aesthetics is just a byproduct of that, right? So I think if you don't know who you are, like you're going to change your personality to be like that. Because like Cam said, you know, like when you're in a community, like you want to be in that community. So like you end up like becoming like that if you don't know who you are.
And for context, C-Bum or Chris Bumstead, he's this YouTuber influencer that obviously goes to the gym a lot and just a big hunky dude. And he competes in Mr. Olympia, like this competition for essentially the strongest weightlifters in the world, and they just show off their bodies and like flex on stage. So,
and he's Canadian.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Canadian.
Yeah. But I think that's like a great segue into, I guess, our next conversation, which is just around the fact that, men aren't allowed to like show certain types of emotions, like more so just like crying or like sadness. Like we are only normalized to be angry. Like if you cry, you look weak. And in Gen Z speak, like girls will say like, oh, like guys who cry give me the ick, you know? And I think this applies to men of all ages, because I remember a time when I was actually going with my dad and my sister to go visit my grandpa's tombstone. And like, keep in mind, like I've never seen my dad cry. Like he gets cut, he gets burned, he's like, ow. And then he just like moves on with it. But this was like the only time when like my dad started talking to my grandpa on his tombstone. And then all of a sudden, like I just hear this whimpering, and I'm like, where's that coming from? And I look at my dad, and he's like, one teardrop comes out. And then like as soon as I looked at him, he like sniffed it up, and then he just like started walking away. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And it was like the only time he allowed himself to like have emotion in that like 1 second, even though like I can tell like how emotional he was. And I just thought, wow, like that was like such a representation of, I guess, just like how men aren't allowed to like show this type of level of emotion just because they have to be the man of the house. They have to be like a leading example. They got to be tough. Sorry to expose you, boss. So, but yeah, I don't know if you guys have similar experiences like that, or how you think about like regulating your emotions now because of this.
Yes. So like there is this aspect of it where I see it in a lot of like me and also a lot of my friends and other things. It's that this concept of like the hype around being like, oh, you gotta psych yourself up for something, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling sad about such and such a thing, but instead of being like, okay, I'm gonna be sad about it, it's like I gotta psych myself up, get myself out there, get back to the gym. Like nothing against physical activity. I work in physical rehab. I preach this stuff every day, but like there's a certain aspect where guys push past it by ignoring it, by getting like almost like, because anger is like a higher state emotion than sadness. You have to be able to sit down to be sad, whereas when you get angry, you have to get up and you move around, so you can overcome sadness with anger and like move around. But then to elaborate on that, like societally, if we like, it's okay, quote unquote, for us to be angry about something when something upsets us, but when we act on that anger, it's no longer socially acceptable. And so then that like demonizes something that we've been taught to do, and now we're not able to actually then follow through or do anything about it. And to elaborate on that a little further, then you have guys that like in our own time, when we're by ourselves, that's when we get very sad because we can't express it anywhere else. And so you have like sad boy hours. It's literally a meme. It's like where it's like it's 2 a.m. in your room and you're like, wow, now I'm super duper sad because I can be sad now. Yeah. And I think that's where guys like fall into like heavy depressive episodes.
Yeah, it's a like scream in your pillow at like 1 a.m. type of feeling. Or I mean, it's definitely led to a rise of like even a certain type of music, right? Like I think people that are Gen Z or younger are familiar with like Joji. Like this guy literally rose just because his music is just the epitome of sad boy. And so all the sad boys in the world like unite with his music, and it's just like a collective representation that like, oh, like when I listen to Joji, all the boys know like we're just sad, you know, and that's like okay. Because there's this, I guess, role model or person that validates, it's community, and then like every other emotion, just funnel that into anger, and then the only, I guess, acceptable means of dissipating that emotion is through the gym. And so like you kind of just all of a sudden just get a bunch of jack dudes because they're all angry,
all sad.
But then if you externalize it to other people, they're like, oh, like you're so violent, like why are you like that, like, you know? And so it is kind of this like toxic culture where there isn't a lot of release and acceptance for what is happening, and there's not a lot of guy talk around like emotions, right? Like guys are always talking about cars or like how to do better at work. It's not so much like, oh, like how you feeling today, Cam? Or like how you feeling today, Marcus? Oh, you're feeling sad? Like why, man? Like you know, I care for you. It's like, oh, like what? You know?
What do you mean you want to say this?
If you look at most like extreme ends of like high-end sports, like you have like the people who do like extreme bodybuilding, but you also have like the ultra marathon runners and stuff like that. If you like if you watch the documentaries, it kind of glorifies it a little bit, where it's just like, oh, these people are like awesome and they're like able to do these crazy things. But when you go and talk to these individuals, because I've met a bunch of them on long hiking trips and stuff, you see them in the mountains, you just talk to them, and like this is also from my friends talking about it too. Like every single one of them is fighting something very heavy, and so you don't get to that point unless you're fighting something. And so I was like, so this is how they fight their battles. They run for 100 kilometers. And I'm like, that like it's the same when you see it for like what's his name, the dude who broke his feet while he was running.
Oh, David Goggins.
Like David Goggins kind of guy. Yeah. Where like you listen to his podcast, he's fighting so many demons in his head when he's running. Yeah. And so you have those types of people, and I feel like it's the same for a lot of guys, but they go into completely different directions with it in a lot of different ways. That some people get really, really into music, but then there's a whole discussion of like, what are you coming into agreement with when you're listening to all this music, and what are you putting yourself into?
Yeah, I think you bring a really good point where, sure, there's like physical ways to exert, I guess, anger, these emotions, but often a lot of times, like, I mean, for people in general, but I obviously from firsthand experience know and see it in men who have like these deep, deep insecurities, and they funnel it through like, yeah, being the greatest at business or the greatest at sports. And you wonder like, what's that driving factor behind them? Because like the difference between like the person who's like the best in like a country or like the best in a high school is like the bigger the demon behind the story. It's like there's something that happened that was so traumatic that pushed them to the edge where they're like, I'm gonna be so great, because that's how they build themselves up. And it's really interesting because like, ironically, when you have a solid foundation and you're like a happy person and like you're, you know, like less trauma, I think everybody has like a decent, like, not saying that there's no trauma in the world, but if you're just raised in this like great environment, you don't have like that extra drive to like be great. For example, like if you look at like our Kevin Durant or like a LeBron James, like they came from like single family background. They're like, I want to prove my father wrong, or like, you know, I grew up on the streets. And it was that level of intensity that made them who they are today. But then you get somebody from, you know, with like two loving parents, and they love you and they give you all this attention and they give you everything you want and things like that, and you're just kind of like, life is great, like,
and they're not in the NBA.
Yeah, I don't need to be. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a really great point.
I don't know. I think like in terms of like emotions and men, I think it's harder and harder for boys in this day and age with the like just with like TikTok and stuff to, I guess, be able to learn those things. Because obviously when I grew up in like the 70s, no, I'm just
I didn't do that, man.
like in the 90s, like cell phones and internet is like not like a super big thing. So like, you know, the only way you made friends is like going to school. You like talk to everybody at school, and there's nothing wrong with like talking to girls at school. But it seems like now, like when boys talk to girls, it's like, ooh, you're this. It's like, why? It's like they're just friends, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're just classmates.
Yeah.
But like, so I think the way kids grow up now, it's like harder for them to grow up to be, I guess, men who respect everybody. Whereas it's just like bros, literally bros over, but like they're not even like they're just girls.
Yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah, it's become ingrained.
yeah, it's like I'm just with my boys, and like, you know, girls are, you know, people I get phone numbers from, and like I just want to list the phone numbers of these people, or you know, and then when you go to college, it's like, oh, like, you know, these girls are just who I party with, and you know, I think that's not how men should be growing up, but that's just what kids see on TikTok and YouTube, and like there's not a lot of positive famous influencers that can, like, I guess, influence boys to be better. Because it's funny when you talk about like men and crying and stuff like that, because for me, I guess growing up, like I had less friends that were guys, and I had more friends that were girls.
They cried all the time.
Yeah, I had no problem with that. No, actually, no joke. Yeah, no joke. Like, no joke. Like, I, like, at school, like, if I cried, it's fine. It's funny because, like, from, like, kindergarten to, like, grade 3, like, I had a lot of friends that were girls, and, like, we would just always hang out. And then, I don't know, like, even then, like, guys might, like, boys would be, like, bully me for, like, oh, like, why are you always hanging with the girls? Like, blah, blah, blah. And then something, like, switches when you're, like, grade 3, 4, 5, and they're, like, yo, like, you're always hanging out with them. Like, can you, like, help me talk to them? I'm like, what is going on? Like, 2 years ago in my class, like, you're the same person, but, like, you're bullying me for, like, hanging out with girls. But, like, I think that's a more natural way for kids to grow up. Whereas now, when you're, like, in elementary school, you already have a cell phone. You're, like, looking at these people. It's like, oh, like, this is how I'm supposed to talk to girls. This is how I'm supposed to treat girls. And, like, okay, like, no emotions. You know, I just have to be, you know, tough. I have to, like, stand up for myself. I gotta stand up for my bros. You know, I gotta, you know, get angry. I gotta fight. You know, and I think it's so hard for kids to have the, I guess, quote unquote, softer side of the emotion to be like caring, to be kind, to, give your lunch to somebody else and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I mean, all these things play into like, I guess, what you see online, and kids are super influential, as we know. So like, I mean, for me, like, I'm okay with crying, and like if someone sees me cry, like that's fine. I mean, if you're uncomfortable, just that's something that you have to deal with. If you can't cry, I want to know why you can't cry, because I'm a man and I can cry. Like I want you to cry, and I'll cry with you. But there's so many times where guys will be like, no, like I'm okay. It's like, you're not okay. Like, and tell me why you're not okay. And I think that's what kids need to learn these days. And I don't know, just have to find a way to spread that. And it's tough when all they see is like anger is like your main emotion.
Yeah.
And like you use that as your fuel to like do everything else. I mean, just the phrase of fighting your demons, like you're literally like aggressing, and like you have to be angry, and like you have to battle these things, right? So I think, I don't know, scary.
So like, what do you guys think is God's truth in all of this? Like, what do you think he thinks of this? And like, how do you think we can strengthen ourselves to, I guess, navigate this like tough time?
I mean, a lot of people were angry with Jesus, and, I think Jesus never responded in anger. He was always calm, collected. He knows where his worth is coming from, and his response is always love. And I mean, I guess for us, that is our main role model, and that's what we strive for. Because there's another saying another phrase that we all know is "kill them with kindness." You can overwhelm someone with like so much love that like they have no choice, but their own anger is like diffused. And if we want to follow what God wants for us, it's like, if someone's angry with you, I guess you have two choices. You can get angry, or you can recognize why they're angry and, try to love them even though they're angry with you. And I think when we are able to be good role models for other people, I think God sees us and it's like, that's my kid. And like, I'm happy about that because, they know what it's like and they have the heart of, being a good Christian. I think that's super important. Yeah.
I really like what you said. Jesus knows his worth.
Yeah, true.
And we should be more like Jesus. So you should know your worth.
That's funny.
I have a couple different thoughts, but I'll start with anger, because one concept that we have, like a biblical concept, is like righteous anger. Because anger is not fundamentally a bad thing.
True.
It's just that the devil likes to pervert everything that God has made good.
True.
And so, like, Jesus turned over tables.
True.
Like, he got upset sometimes.
True.
But you also could see that he regulated his emotions in different ways. Like, he even went off. He had to have his own time. He'd go take a sleep in the bottom of a boat, right? Like, he had his own time, place, and ability to regulate his emotions. And when he got angry, it was for the right reasons. And so just getting yourself to that point where you can be like, okay, I want to be thankful now is such a big change, because especially for guys, because there's a meme about it too, where it's like, oh, guys will watch one motivational video and their whole day will flip, right? It's the same thing where it's like, if you can get yourself to that place of thankfulness, you can flip your day, male or female. But guys do it a lot more than where we switch our mindsets very, very fast. And so I feel like that's a different tool that we can use as Christians to be like, okay, I just need to sit down and I need to thank God for something.
Yeah, that's true. I guess like if you think about it, like their thankfulness and I guess like being sad, they're like opposite sides of the same spectrum, right? And there's just a different perspective of how you look at anything. Because when you're thankful, you're looking at the positive things in whatever the situation is. But then if you're sad, you're looking at all the bad things in the situation. So I guess that's your, glass half full, glass half empty type of thing, right? Like it's the same coin, but, different side of it. So I guess, yeah, it's true. I never realized that.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Brain blast.
Yeah, that's
I mean, there's that saying, right? Like life doesn't happen at you; it just happens, and it's hard
Yeah.
to not associate or ascribe. For example, like, oh, like why did God do this to me? You know, and you don't necessarily stop to think like, well, maybe it just happens as a result of like living on Earth, right? Like Earth is like a world of sin, and like all these like bad things happen here. Doesn't mean God's not present, but you know, things like disease or like injury or accidents can happen, and they might not have been intended by God, right? Like even with like the story of Job, where he was like tested by God, but he had no idea, he did nothing wrong, and he like his children were killed, like all his animals were taken away, his servants were killed, he had no money, and his wife was just like beating him down on with words, and yeah, he was just like hopeless, and his friends were essentially gaslighting him, saying like, oh, like you did this wrong, you probably did this, and like you know, you lived your life wrong. And he's like, no, I didn't, like I really didn't. But never once did he turn that towards God. He was angry, he showed it to God, but I think that was really a key point there. And so like when we're reflecting on our own lives, it can be really tough, you know, like I've torn my ACL, and then like that took me away from playing volleyball, and for the longest time it felt like I lost my identity. And I think I distinctly remember asking God, like, why did you do this to me? And ironically, like whether he did or didn't, and I looked back now, it's been like 10 years, I'm so glad it happened. And the younger me wouldn't have understood it until I had all this time passed.
Right.
And I realized like now I'm able to connect with people that have also like torn the ACL, but at the same time, because I sort of like fought my way back and like fought those demons, that it led me to a greater place of revelation. And yeah, I just now thinking about it, like, oh, I wouldn't say it's stupid, but knowing what I know now, I wouldn't want the same path that I did when I was younger. And it was like God had to like pull me from that path. It was like, no, you're not going here. Like I have something better for you. And it's going to hurt right now, but you're going to thank me later. Just trust me. And it was just so hurtful in the moment. But now I'm like, wow, like I'm so glad it happened, and I would do it again. I mean, I wouldn't want to happen again, but like I wouldn't like reverse that. Like I don't regret it.
like what so like, you know, your first question was like, oh, like there's no time for like people to reflect, you know. And I mean, I'm stereotyping, but like you being in like the tech world, you know, you're always, you know, connected to your computer, you know, like, I don't know, phone and stuff like that. And you're always talking to people about tech and stuff like that. Like, you know, what allowed you to, I don't know, recognize that and like reflect on that part of your life? Because obviously we're so busy, you know, in the 21st century, you're like, you always want to do something, you know, and you're always like, if I'm not doing something, I'm not being productive. You always want to be productive. But like, at what point were you like, I guess what inspired you or what spurred you to be like, oh, like I recognize this and I reflect on this part of my life, and like I bring this with me to like, I don't know, build other people up type of thing.
I mean, I think during that time I was like 17, and I wouldn't say I was like actively going to church or like seeking God, but there was just some little voice in my head that kept telling me like my life isn't over, even though it felt like it, because like my whole identity for the last 5 years between like 12 to 17 was playing volleyball. And so like it felt like the end of the world. But then when I had that little voice, and you know, I'm pretty sure that was the Holy Spirit just saying like, I have something better for you. And then I funneled all of that into my academic studies, and then just, I guess, building my identity back up again into like, you know, being more, I guess, like business focused or career focused, and translated a lot of things I learned from sports and athletics into my career. But I think more specifically in tech now, it's good to first start with the foundation. And I think because that experience was so painful, that ironically I over-indexed on reflecting. Like I was always like, okay, in this point in time, is this the best path forward for me? So like every 3 months, every 6 months, I'm like asking myself like, am I almost gonna lose my identity again by doing this, right? Because when you go through like the lowest of the lows, I think you owe it to yourself to remember how that felt, because you don't want to make that like same mistake, or you don't want to have that feeling again. And so for me, it was just like constant reflection. And so even though there's like constant bombardment from technology, just reminding myself of like how painful that experience was. And I think, again, it's like you're saying, there's always two sides of it. Like technology is the most powerful thing if you know how to use it properly.
Agreed.
And we have access to pretty much all of human intelligence bundled into these devices. And it's ironic that we have people that are more misinformed than ever because they're not actually looking through the information and imparting it into their mind, body, and spirit. And so it's kind of ironic that way, where we're looking at technology as this like evil thing, where it's just a tool. It's more just like, how are we looking at it, how are we using it, and starting from the base. And I think obviously being at Rain City and being more comfortable with who I am, understanding my gifts, having the God confidence to say like, this is where I want to go, this is who I want to be, and this is how technology helps me get there. And this is also how I see how technology can help other people. But that being said, like, it's not like I don't fall into the trap of scrolling on IG or like TikTok. But interestingly enough, like, I don't know if this is replicable, but every like 20 or 30 minutes, there's like this like little timer in my head that's like, boom, like you're I don't want to say wasting time, but it's like you're falling in the loop, like get out of the loop. And then I'm just like, oh, okay, time to shut off. And then I just like log off.
That's pretty good self-control. I have the timer, but I'm like, no, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That's true. Technology is like really helpful. And like, that's a good point. Like, I don't know why technology, like just like TikTok and YouTube, like how is it that like, I guess your quote unquote, like, you know, toxic people are like more prevalent and like they're so much more, I don't know, out there compared to like your, I guess your positive you know, influencers, right? Like, you know, how can it be, or why is it that, I mean, I don't know, maybe I know why, but like, why is it that, you know, the people that are for, I don't know, like gyms and like working through the pain and like don't think about the pain and like, or you have pain because you're weak, you know, like why is that so strong? And like, I mean, I guess it like resonates with a lot of men, but at the same time it's like that's the stuff that is like out there and it's like super popular, but like the positive people are not as, I don't know, powerful, I guess, as or as influential. And I guess, you know, I don't know what to do about that, but you know, I guess, I mean, I feel like you guys read a lot of like documentaries and books and stuff like that of positive people, because I don't. So like, I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Maybe they are out there, they're like super influential, but I don't read books and watch documentaries. So for me, I'm like, that's all I see, and I feel like, I guess other people, if they're like me, and like if a lot of the majority of the kids are like me, then like they're not getting that positive, I guess, pushback compared to like all the negativity and like stuff like that. So, I mean,
I think it's a combination of two different things. I think there's the influence side where people in society, or like men in society, don't really know how to regulate their emotions. Those people aren't prominent enough on the platforms. But then at the same time, I think it's also that because we, like, as a society, we've been kind of babied. Things are relatively easy now.
True.
And so with that, people's mindsets, it's a lot of like path of least resistance, but make it look like the most resistance. And so people would be like, oh, I go to the gym and I work so hard and I do all this stuff. But in reality, you're just using that because it's like, I know exactly what I need to do at the gym. I know the exercises, I know the routine. And from an external perspective, I can always talk about that and people will think that I'm doing a certain level of good. But in reality, it's like I'm masking that because I have this other hurt that I don't want to come to terms with, that I don't know how to come to terms with. And that's a scary reality for me to actually comprehend and like go into and dig into. But then going into the gym where all these other influencers and other people are telling me that this is going to help this hurt, I'm going to do that because that seems like a straightforward and something that I can accomplish. And so people end up really diving into those types of things. And it's the same thing for like, if we bring it back to like the toxic masculinity, like Andrew Tate kind of thing. Like we have the guys who are like, I can't get like a girl, or I can't get something decided that I want. But then you have this guy that comes along and goes, if you just do A, B, and C, you'll get exactly what you want. Look at me. I did that, and now I get exactly what I want. But in reality, it's like, no, but you're still masking all these things that you need to come to terms with. And so I think that path of least resistance gives people online like a lot of clout.
Yeah.
Because then people will just follow that, and then people will share that and be like, it made me feel better.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's like so many layers to it, because I think you're right, where people aren't working on like the fundamental truths of like what's going on in their head. So if they're not tackling that and just covering it with these like surface level things, it doesn't really address the issue. And there's like this quote that says, productivity without direction is like driving a fast car in the wrong direction. So like if you don't know where you're going, you're just going to be driving really fast aimlessly. And so it's almost important for you to just stop what you're doing and reflect and really say like, okay, who do I want to be? Where do I want to go before you do all these things? And then once you understand it, then you can, apply technology, and then it can supercharge you, right? But then when you're getting all of this feedback and then you don't have your own internal state to supplement that with, yeah, of course, like you're just going to do what other people tell you because like it's proven, right? It works.
Yeah.
The interesting thing though, specifically about the gym, is that physiologically, whether you're at any point and state of a human, it just makes you feel better. So then it like subconsciously feeds you into that narrative, because like you go work out or you even just go for a 30-minute walk.
Yeah.
Your body will just feel better. Like your dopamine receptors are active. I
mean, for guys, like if you're feeling bad, go get a haircut. like actually, like I know guys who periodically get haircuts every 2 weeks. They have their barber and they're like, I get a haircut every 2 weeks because I know that that's going to make me feel better and it resets my week. These guys I talk that they don't go to church, they don't do other things. Like for us, we have like, I need to go to church. Like it's almost like a need. It's like I like being here. It resets my week, along with a lot of other stuff. But for him, he's like, no, I get my haircut twice a week. I need to get a clean fade before I go into work on Monday, and then I can hit my week. And so I feel like guys have certain things like that where they're like, oh, I missed my like beer and wing night with my boys, and now I feel like I can't do this. Or like I didn't get to play Val with some of my guys last night, or something like that. Like these guys have very simple things, but it affects them deeply because I feel like men spiral because of those things.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I feel really good after I get a haircut. And everyone's like, oh, you look good. You look fresh. And you're just like, I got a little extra pep in my step.
Crazy.
Yeah. I guess it's the same thing when like girls do their eyebrows and stuff like that. So I get it, ladies. I get it.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's just part of like, I mean, like, maybe it's just because guys don't compliment guys that much,
That's true.
So like, when you do get a haircut, like
people notice
all
generally.
your guys are like,
hey, yo, sick fade, bro.
Nice haircut. So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's just changing the culture of what it's like to, I guess, be a guy. And like you said in the beginning, like guys don't ask each other like, how are you doing? Like really ask how you're doing instead of just like, oh, like, how's your day? It's good. Okay, cool. Let's go play games. It's like there's no like, I guess, sincerity in a lot of like our interactions. And like, sure, like, we're honest with each other, but we never ask like the deep stuff. I mean, just the other day I saw like a video of like two girls sitting face to face, and they're like, that's how they talk. But then the question on the caption was like, oh, like explain to me why like girls sit face to face, but then guys sit side to side. And then like beside them is like their boyfriends, and they're like sitting beside each other, and they're not looking at each other when they're talking. But like they're talking, and they're having a good conversation. Sure, they're like talking about like whatever game they're watching on the TV, but it's like just like those small things. It's like guys don't sit face to face and be like like what can I do for you this week? Like how can I help you this week? And I think if there was more of that, then like getting a haircut would not make your week that amazing. You know, it's just like it'd be like, okay, cool, like you notice.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
You know, but I think that's along the lines of like why when guys are saying, like when guys say to girls like, oh, like you got a haircut, they're like, oh, you noticed, you know, because like guys aren't supposed to portray this like, you know, type of attentiveness and like care for people, because guys are tough and like we're simple people and like, you know, so I don't know.
There's a couple of points that come to mind there. The first one is that like I've seen very similar things where it just talks about guys' activities and women's activities, where guys' activities are always side by side, women's activities are face to face. It's like, oh, you're having coffee or whatever with the girls are having coffee, the guys are watching the game. It's like, we're gaming, we're playing video games, whatever, right? And I think that does influence into like how we interact with each other. And to bring it back to biblical things, we have like the story of Elijah, where like dude just did something like awesome, crazy, but then like got threatened, he's gonna die, he runs away, and then gets depressed. He's like, God, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
And in that moment, God kind of leads him to a place to sleep, and then an angel wakes him up and is like, here's cake. Eat some cake, bro.
Yeah.
And like one thing that changed my mindset a lot when I was going through a more depressive episode in university, like one thing that helped a lot was just someone was just like, don't contemplate your life when you're tired, man.
True.
And I was like, huh, you're right. It always is the worst. It's the worst when I'm contemplating when I'm tired. And so like the story really resonated with me, because I'm like, all right, yo, life sucks. And then you're like, oh, slept a bit, ate some stuff. I'm like, oh, I feel a lot better, and like I can think about life properly. Where it's like the same situation isn't as daunting anymore. I feel like a lot of guys don't let themselves think about things when it's a rational time to think about things. Where it's like, oh, it's sad boy hours, it's my time to reflect on my life. And that's usually a bad time to do it. And then you go back into the busyness of your day, you run through your whole day, it's back to 2 a.m. and you're like, okay, time to think about that day. And it's like, oh, I wasted another day or something like that.
Yeah.
Or they just do the first part where it's like you're sad, you just go to sleep, and then you wake up without ever contemplating about it at all.
Yeah.
And then you just go about your day again, and it's like, oh, I'm sad, I'm gonna sleep it off.
Yeah. Oh, to bring it back to the story, the whole point is that God was like, Elijah, you need to go on another journey, right? And God was like, I'm setting you up for that. So like, the nap and the snack is not just for you to carry on with your day, like you said. It's for you to go and do something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for like non-Gen Z speak on the Elijah story, like what Cam was talking about was Elijah went to confront like I think it was like 400 prophets of
Best
Baal.
story in the Bible.
And
Love that story.
he was like, okay, where's your God? Like you rain fire down on your sacrifice. And they're like, I don't know, humming some random stuff. And then he's just like, okay, like God, you're going to do this. And then fire rains down. And then he's like, what's up? You know? And then like entire Israel just converts to, I mean, not converts, but they just go back to the Lord as opposed to following Baal. But then shortly after, Queen Jezebel threatens to kill him, and then he's all of a sudden he forgets that he just did this amazing thing, and God helped him, and he forgot that God was with him, and he's like, I'm gonna die. He's like, I'm gonna run, I'm gonna die. Like he brought fire down from like the sky, and then all of a sudden somebody's like, I'm gonna kill you. He's like, oh shoot. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna rain down fire on you again. And he just kind of like internalized, and I think that's a lot of times when we like felt that way for ourselves. Like we do something really amazing, and then somebody's like, oh, like you're not that great, and you're like, oh.
You're like, oh yeah,
real.
you're right.
Yeah.
That's true. It's true.
Yeah. So, I don't know. You guys have any final thoughts on this topic? Any like lingering things that you have for listeners, like ways that they can, I guess, ways to help regulate or deal with this from, I guess, a more practical standpoint?
I had one thought that came up a couple of times, and it's mainly when we talked about like the topic of like fighting your demons. Like I was reading C.S. Lewis. There's like a Screw Tape Tale. It's one of his books, and one of the things that it talks about is like when like the influence demons have on your life. But demons, you can't contribute directly contribute like a mental illness to demons. Demons aren't like, here's schizophrenia for you. But they can influence your environment, and they can influence the people that you're hanging out with and stuff like that. And it's like that type of environment can create those types of things for you, but they can't directly attribute those types of illnesses. Like, it's not like the devil goes, diabetes on top of you, right? Like that. So that I just want to make sure that the listeners aren't attributing things so directly to the enemy, or it's just like you can fight it by changing your environment. Like, the demons don't actually have that level of influence on you. And like when it comes to mental health, like changing your environment, getting counseling, like all these things are actually like super important. And then the demons just have less influence on your life.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like, God made you, and God made you to be who you are. And, we always hear that, on Sundays and from Steve, it's like the enemy can only do what you allow them to do. And, how you look at your situation makes a big difference. And if you recognize that you are loved by God and you have a community of brothers and sisters who also love you, man, your like whole like view on life changes, So it's like, you got nothing to worry about. Like you said, Jesus knows his worth, and we should know our worth, and I think it's pretty. And I mean, even for me, like, I forget that a lot, like during the week when I'm like not with, I guess, my people, it's like I'm easily distracted. You look over and it's like, oh, like this person in the same profession is like better than me, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But in reality, like, you don't know what they're going through, and you can't just compare apples to apples on the surface, So yeah, I don't know. I think
I've got one quick one. It's the idea of like what men are called to do in society. Like, in the Bible, we're called to be leaders. We're called to be powerful. We're called to be like heads of households, and we're called to provide. But then one thing that not just society, but also just like the influence of the enemy on the world has corrupted that idea of it, where society is telling us like, oh, if you're going to try and provide all the time, like you need to get either attain a certain level of wealth, or it's like, if you're trying to be so powerful, like, why are you trying to be so powerful? Or like, you should be more powerful. Like there's only the extremes that the enemy wants you to be on, where God wants you in this nice, healthy medium, where it's like, okay, I want you to be powerful enough to like protect the people that you love and provide for your family and do all these other things. And I want you to be able to work enough to provide for your family and do all these other things. But I don't want you to neglect your family. I don't want you to hurt people. I don't want you to do all these things. But when we're on so far on each side with all these things that we're called to do in the Bible, then you see the corruption that's happening in the world with and with anger and other things.
Yeah. And I'll close with this. So when people say that they're fighting their demons, oftentimes in the Bible, they refer to demons as they, thems. And so like when you're fighting your demons, one thing that obviously we can do is pray. And Steve talks about praying to bring the legions of heaven to fight, these legions of demons. And so, when you're going through these battles day to day, there are like a lot of influences around you. So just praying for protection, praying for the strength and courage to, fight all of these demons around you, whether they're visible or not.
True.
But yeah, so I just want to thank everyone for listening, and hope that gives you better context for, the men in your life and what they're going through. And, maybe just, if you see somebody, just stop them and just say, hey, you look good today. How are you? And just have a conversation with them. But thank you for tuning into this episode. If you just got one nugget from today, share it with a friend, spread the good word, and perhaps, send them a link to this podcast. It might just allow them for God to work in their life. So with that, we'll close it off.
Peace.
See you guys.
So, peace.